Hello, everyone, and welcome to Grow With Us. My name is Evan Barton, and I'm your host who helps create conversations with the movers and shakers of a growing tech center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Grow With Us is a podcast that highlights the work of In Tulsa and informs you about the exciting and innovative work being done around the city by its best and brightest. In Tulsa's mission is to connect talented individuals and companies to stimulate economic growth in Tulsa and to create more prosperous communities across the region. Each episode, Grow With Us discusses the growth of opportunities, the growth of communities striving for change, or the tech and innovation that is changing the landscape of Tulsa. This week, we're in conversation with Derrick Alexander, financial advisor at Northwestern Mutual, who will be chatting with me about personal financial literacy, knowing how to strategize for yourself with your dollars, and financial planning for communities. Derrick, it's so great to have you on this episode.
Hey, it's great to be here. I'm super excited.
I am too. I kind of always jump into like how I know the person that I'm interviewing and talking with right now, and Derrick was one of like the first people. You gave me like the brain tinglies whenever we were talking about like our finances and stuff through through work benefits and things like that. And I always know those people that are allowing me to do that, because I like the brain tinglers are like, oh, this is something I need to know. And you're telling it to me and I'm vibing with what you're saying, but I'm listening. And like, I don't know, podcasts do that sometimes. So hopefully we can create some brain tingles.
Yeah, let's get some brain tingles going. I like it. I like it.
Derrick, go ahead and tell me your story in whatever way you feel comfortable. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. So I'm actually born and raised from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I've been here pretty much the whole time. I have like moved around and kind of done some different things with sports, but grew up, went to Victory, then graduated from Booker T. Washington, played at the University of Tulsa. Oh yeah, as you know, like Booker T is the
place to be, the place to be, the hive.
The hive.
I love it.
So after that, played at the University of Tulsa. Had the opportunity to go to a few rookie mini camps with the Redskins and Rams. Tore my calf, came back, trained for like a year, then spoke with a friend and became a financial advisor. And I've pretty much been doing that ever since. Found my wife. Now I got 2 kids, and we're here.
That's the story. That's awesome.
Yep.
I think the sports conversation is one we have to have, because I also grew up playing sports and stuff. And I think it's really interesting. Like I remember at one point I was like, the sport I was playing was like boring me at some point, and I was like, I should just ask the coach about their life. And all of my coaches had like professional careers outside of their work, and a lot of people told me they were in finance. I didn't think I really understood what some of the coaches were doing, but it was like an interesting way. You said you like had a conversation with someone on your, like a player or someone that you knew,
yeah,
and that's like triggered something. So because you're in like such tight-knit groups of communities with sports, you guys really get to know each other.
Yeah, my introduction to becoming, so the way I became a financial advisor actually came from like that year when I came back and I was trying to get back healthy, I was trying to be able to run. I would work out at TU every day because they would allow me to be able to come back. While I was there was a guy that was in our finance department by the name of Pete Sandman. Shout out to the Sandman. And he would work out in there every day. And I remember I remember one day I asked him, I was like, hey, I'm not, really wanting to hang up my cleats yet, but I do want to start kind of getting an idea of what might be next. And he said, he actually gave me like a list of names of people to call that were like TU alumni. And he was like, take them to lunch. And I called them, took them out to lunch. Everybody said yes. And then I remember leaving those meetings and I would say, man, I wish I could just sit down and hear people's stories every day. I was like, I wouldn't feel like I was working a day in my life. And I started looking at careers where I could sit down and hear people's stories. And then financial advisor was, I was like, okay, that's how I came.
That makes a lot of sense.
That's how it is. That's literally, I remember, I'll never forget driving in the car. I was like, if I could just sit down and hear people talk about like their origin story, you know what I mean? I was like, I love hearing that.
Yeah.
So,
no, it's so integral. I mean, we'll get to this part later in our conversation, but finances really are a part of people's stories. I mean, it is fundamentally a choice you sometimes don't get to make. You know what I mean? If you really take it back to the beginning, and it's why it's an important knowledge set to learn, and why it's a constant journey. I mean, I have a lot to say about finances.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, it's an important topic, you know? I mean, it literally is in every aspect of our life, you know,
Hmm.
to an extent. And it's a form of energy, you know.
Yeah.
Money allows people to show what's important to them, you know, if they have
Hmm.
the resources to be able to do that. Sometimes, you know, when we're tight, we really gotta be, you know, cognitive of what we're putting our money into. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's important, and that's why I like it, because it literally, when people talk to me about their money, they usually end up talking to me about their family,
Hmm.
emotions, and then you know, I'm pretty opinionated, and I love giving advice, and that's where I realized I was like, I'd be doing this if I wasn't doing anything.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Exactly. Exactly. Well, tell me about. I mean, it sounds like from your story, Tulsa's played a big part in your life and everything. So, what has your experience and relationship with Tulsa been like over the past, your life?
Yeah, Tulsa has been, I would say, electric,
Mm,
you know, just because and what I mean by electric is like the full scope of it. Like, you don't really know what's coming, you don't really know where it's gonna land. You know what I mean? Like
mm,
electric in meaning like lightning or thunder. Like, it's kind of just harboring, it's kind of just there, and then all of a sudden it just strikes, And
yeah.
to me, like, that's the way Tulsa is. A lot of times, like, my friends that have moved here, or even guys that played here, it's like, oh, like, Tulsa, what's Tulsa? You know what I mean? And then they
Mhm.
get here and then they end up staying.
Yeah.
And they're like, man, I really enjoy Tulsa. But I guess to explain my experience, it was unique in the fact that, like, when I was coming up, like, downtown Tulsa wasn't, like the way it is today.
Yeah.
Like, it was like a ghost town. And it was still very separated. Like, South Tulsa and North Tulsa was still very much it was separated. But the cool thing about the way I was raised was I lived in North Tulsa and I went to school in South Tulsa.
Hmm.
So I was always kind of going back and forth. So I was able to kind of experience different things and almost really, like, see, compare and contrast the communities. So
Yeah.
now I fast forward, I'm at TU and I'm starting to see Tulsa, like, cultivate, and starting to see more like integration. You know what I mean? And you starting to people are moving into town, and it's almost like a lightning bolt hit, right? Like, to me as a native Tulsan, it feel, there's a lot of electricity in the air of just, so we're so excited about what Tulsa can be, and what
Hmm.
it's becoming, where people like yourself are moving in and adding to the experience. I think that is so important, because a lot of times, like, some people will say, like, oh, well, Tulsa need to be doing this, Tulsa need to be doing that. But honestly, the new blood that kind of comes in from out of state and the new exposure that you all bring adds to that excitement. You know what I mean? It pushes people.
Hmm.
So that's what I would say about my experience. Some communities that have kind of been birthed, recently, have been really helpful. Like, due to my wife, like, I was able to get plugged in with, like, Tulsa Remote, like, building Tulsa, talent in Tulsa. I mean, but there's just so many exciting things. Like, those communities that are encouraging people to come to Tulsa, um, and stay in Tulsa and build their families and their lives around in Tulsa, have been really helpful to, some of the success and the work that I'm doing as far as being a financial advisor, because it's able to help people. I'm able to also, since I'm from Tulsa, I'm also able to kind of direct them to, like, certain patches of, like, communities, essentially, or if they're even frustrated about Tulsa and they're like, man, I just can't seem to like get in, I can kind of give some understanding as to, like, well, why that may be, and maybe here's somebody that you should know or get in touch with. 36 Degrees North, all those chains, everything that's going on with Black Wall Street. I mean, there are just so many communities that are almost kind of like breathing and coming alive together, right?
Hmm.
And at some point in time, like, they kind of they kind of immerse themselves with each other, and it just creates, like, this big old great community of, like, forward thinking, smart, intelligent,
Hmm.
diverse people, which a lot of good things can happen.
Oh yeah, and we love the shout out in that list, and I think it's so important that these communities do come together, especially with a conversation like finances and financial planning, because we have a lot to learn from each other, and
Yep.
that's really the one benefit of this community and us being connected to so many organizations, that we get to reap that benefit immediately, which is
Yeah. So far.
yeah, it creates a reaction of people, ideas, opportunities. I think that's a really interesting analogy for it too, because I would totally agree. I think when you combine kind of someone's outside experience with what the place that you're trying to change, and someone that's passionate for that, I think that's when the electric happens. That's when the magic happens. And it's also really interesting. We have very inverse experiences with schooling until we got to Booker T. Because like I was going to school. Well, I guess if you think about me going to Booker T, I lived in Midtown South. I lived in Midtown and drove to North Tulsa, and you were in North Tulsa driving to like South Tulsa area. And that is interesting. I bet that creates such a different conception of what Tulsa's like for both of us.
Yeah, and that's why I think, what makes Booker T special, a quick Booker T plug, would be the fact that when, and I'd love to hear your experience about it with it as well, but it didn't feel like there were cliques. Like I remember coming from a school that it was super cliquey, but I remember like the football team, like I was on the football team and the speech and debate team, and we all hung out. You know what I mean? Like there was no like, you can't sit at this table, you can't sit at that table. Like everybody sat down with everybody. Everybody wanted everybody to do well. Like I remember going to support our academic team.
Yeah.
Like those are special things. And I see that trying to be emulated here in Tulsa,
Yes. I think what I've described to people about the energy of Booker T that really I think was a game changer for me was that everyone was proud to be a student of Booker T. And I think I could look at everyone and they would be like, yeah, I'm glad I go here, which is that school spirit. When I got to college, nobody gave a crap about like sports or like what other people did. Everyone was so focused on themselves. And I feel like high school is it's high school, but like you get to be in people's lives at literally when they're changing the most.
Yeah.
And that can, when you know that, the school spirit part isn't going to change, it's kind of unifying. It felt like it brought us all together. And that's why like, the Pride of the Great Southwest, like all the school hymn, like I love Booker T, and I will always like Booker T always gets a plug on this podcast.
Yeah. I mean, and it's also, it speaks to after you leave there, right? Because like me and my friends, we'll go to Texas. I remember we went to California and we linked up with Booker T. I went to New York. I have friends out there in New York that were from Booker T. Like it's like a little fraternity,
Oh yeah, it's good to have those connections, and I mean, it means we come from a good place.
Yes, yeah, good stuff.
So kind of, I mean, I think this next question is really related to this too, but maybe a little bit deeper. So tell me a little bit more about your experiences with specific communities in Tulsa, or it can be beyond Tulsa, that have impacted you in your professional trajectory.
Yeah. So really the interesting thing about that is one of the things that have had the biggest impact was seeing Tulsa through individuals' eyes that weren't from Tulsa. So when I was at TU and I had teammates coming to town, which is the University of Tulsa for those that don't know. But I had teammates that would move to Tulsa and they would ask me like, hey, where's the go? Where to go? Like, and then I'd take them there and then they would have an experience and they would see it through their lens. But then when I would go to their town, or let's say I go to Houston or I'd meet them in New York, wherever it is, like I would get to experience their city, through my eyes and where I was raised. So those things really, really shaped me. And I would say also going back to, going to school in South Tulsa and then like for them a large part of my life and then living in North Tulsa, like that experience there, since I was able to kind of see both sides, while one side may think one perception, while the other side might think the other perception, I was able to kind of just see like, it's really all the same, like the kid that's in North Tulsa that may be, in some trouble, that may be, doing some things that he isn't supposed to do. The underlying reasons why he's doing those things are the same reason why the kid in South Tulsa is maybe doing something with drugs, you know what I mean? Or dealing with some form of depression, you know what I mean? Like it's all the same underlying feeling. So that really just kind of helped me really be balanced, instead of being too far one way, too far the other way. It really allows me at times in my professional career when I sit down with people and they're telling me their story, and it may be a great story or it may be a story of like, you think, I look like I'm doing really well, but I really need some help, and it just allows you to have understanding and say like, okay, like you don't know what that person was going through, so it just allows you to just be balanced and gives people opportunities and, just be patient,
Yeah,
so
the
that.
human experience is unfortunately universal.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But it, also professionally allowed me to get in the doors,
Yeah.
because I was able, since I know people in this community, I know people in that community. Like when I walk around Tulsa, sometimes like when I'm with my wife, they're like, everywhere we go, somebody, and I'm like,
Yeah.
well, I kind of was on, all over the place, and that's been a blessing. And, that's been very helpful as well.
Yeah, I think that I mean I really like the narrowing in on like the human experience being something that you can have such a different perspective throughout this whole city. Your experience is isolated to your region or whatever.
Hmm.
That's like what a lot of people say. Like your experience with Tulsa, it depends on where you live, or your experience with anywhere depends on where you live in that city. And so kind of getting to share that with other people is really important. And then like you said, you can kind of draw that through line and
Yeah.
see where and I know it probably benefits you in your professional career too, is kind of see like where if they had taken this step they would be there, or if they had taken this step they might be down there, but they still have the chance to go up. You kind of see probably these ups and downs with people.
The unique thing is, or I would say the interesting thing about like being a financial advisor is a lot of times when people hear a financial advisor, I assume what they hear is investing and numbers and all these different things. But the true value of a financial advisor is the behavioral finance, right? So like helping people through their emotions during critical times in
Hmm.
their lives. And that's where I think like the human experience that you speak about is so important, right?
Yeah.
Like being able to sit down and understand where somebody's coming from and how their experiences may affect what they do with their money.
Hmm.
Like you got to understand that first before you try to correct the habit, because if you
Hmm.
don't understand that and where it's coming from, it's just going to keep reoccurring,
Yeah.
So, and it's going to keep you from building a relationship, right? Because at the end of the day, like, you have influence with people that you have relationship with, or you feel like they usually have your best interests at heart.
Yeah, 100%. I kind of want to. We're right on the door of this question, and I kind of want to get to it because I really am curious about your perspective. So, in my interactions with you, and so I met Derrick originally when we were working on my personal finances, which is so fun. I mean, it's so interesting to now be sitting with you like that. That conversation happened almost a year ago.
Yeah.
I have a lot to fill you in on.
Yeah, there we go. We got to get together.
If some time allows. But from my interactions with you, I mean, I really get this passion for education and for guidance, especially as it relates to personal finances and like investment management.
Mhm.
And so, can you kind of tell me about that passion and kind of just tell me about that, what that experience is like for you professionally.
I think it's birthed out of the way I was kind of the community I was raised in, right? Like for me, growing up, I got a lot of things for free. You know what I mean? And it was just
Mm-hmm.
out of the goodness of people's hearts.
Mm-hmm.
Just if it was football, like I'd go to camps. You know what I mean? Or I'd get training, and people are just willing to share knowledge. Also, I was very opinionated, and I liked giving advice, and I liked learning about finance. I've always it's all you kind of have those things that you pick up on, like for an artist, it may be music or
Mm-hmm.
um I'm trying to think, or
I'm a
maybe
big
drawing.
gamer nerd, so I know a
Oh,
lot of gaming things. Yeah,
and it
yeah.
just clicks to you, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it just clicks. For me, finance was just like a click,
Yeah.
and for me, it was really, I really understood. I wasn't a fan of making things super complicated. So I was like, how can I make this as simple as possible? That way people can understand it. And it usually helps. So that's the big passion of it. And also the other big passion of it is, right, I get to meet people every day. I get to get exposure to different businesses or people's financial situation or stories. And I get to basically put those all together every time I meet with somebody,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I can just kind of sit back and I listen and I say, okay, where have I heard this before? I may have heard this before. What may be the underlying theme of this that we may need to correct?
Mm-hmm.
How do I word this? It's almost like, I won't say a game, but it does scratch like some form of an itch for me. Like sitting down, I get to help somebody. I get to
Yeah.
use my brain, almost like a puzzle. And I also get compensated.
Yeah.
so that
Definitely.
so it so all those things like hit different things for me, as far as the reason why I like doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. I think something you said earlier of like, when people think of the word financial advisor, I was going to interject, but now's a good time to interject instead of actually interrupting you. I thought of whenever I think of a financial advisor, there was a time in my life, and maybe this time in my life was like a year ago, and a half ago, but I would be like, I don't know. I can't tell you what a financial advisor does. I think you're right on with like, everyone thinks that a lot of people in the financial industry are really better at serving people with finances or people with the actual liquidity or capital to play in the game.
Yep.
But if you're not in the game, then there's no need to talk to a financial advisor because I got to get by, basically.
Yeah.
But I mean, something that I grabbed from our conversation that you when you were advising me is that like, it's a game the whole time, and you just got to decide when you're going to start playing.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel.
Yeah. No, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's really up to you. Like, building wealth is, first, let me just kind of take a step back. For the large part of like advisors' history, it has kind of been like that. Like, it's my mom and dad's person. You know what I mean? Or, they only work with X amount of dollars. I got to have $500,000 to go talk to them, But the unique thing about the landscape that we're in now is almost everybody's going after, you look at the Robin Hood, Charles Schwab, Fidelity, like everybody's going after it now. It's just, I think, like we said, we spoke about this before, we talked about timing, right? If you reach somebody at the right time and you tell them what you do, right? Because I caught you at the right time and it was like, hey, do you also want to, talk about X, Y, and Z? And you're like, yeah. And then that conversation evolves and, you're allow yourself to receive that education or take those steps, right? But before that, you may have heard it, in passing and been like, I don't want to hear that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So with technology and with the advent of kind of the accessibility and financial knowledge and kind of that space, I think it would be great to kind of hear from you, Derrick. What are some pieces of financial advice that you think are the most fundamental yet often not understood?
Yeah, I think the most fundamental is budgeting, right? And I think the most important is saving. Okay, I think it's underappreciated because one thing that you probably even heard me say, maybe it was a year ago, but I always say, like, I always tell my clients that it's easy. It's hard to raise capital. It's easy to deploy it, right? So it's hard for us to save money. So I always say, let's start with the hard thing in mind. Like, let's get really good at just saving, right? Okay. So if we have our budget and we say, okay, I got $2,000, $4,000 a month or whatever it is, and whatever your expenses are, well, whatever you have left over, have some way to capture it automatically. You know what I mean? And it may be in a place that you can't touch it, right? Whether it be like your retirement plan or it be like your Roth or it be like a outside money market account, right? Like, just find some way to automatically capture that. I always say, like, don't play with it. Don't flirt with it. Yeah. Like, you don't let it sit there in your account because inevitably, our friends are going to go to Cancun or something, or there's going to be a car or we're going to have just like a crazy night, and the money's gone, or a car breaks down, just whatever it is. Just capture that money and just get really good at capturing it. And as your income grows, don't adjust your quality of living. Now, of course, if you have, if you get married, you have kids, things like that, like, your expenses are naturally going to change. You get a different job. For the most of our ability, or to the most of our ability, let's find a way to capture those dollars on an automated savings. And I'm like, if you woke up at the end of the year and you save $6,010 or $12,000 a year, $24,000, like whatever that amount is, if it's $200 a month, or $250, like $3,000 a year, you wouldn't wake up and be mad.
Oh, no.
Right? Like, you wouldn't wake up and be mad. So how do we create that situation? And then once we have the $3,000, we can figure out how we want to spend it, right? Yeah. I can break it up. I can put that $3,000 on debt. I could have it in my emergency account, which I always suggest having 3 to 6 months of savings, right? Like that should be the first thing, right? That should be the first thing, even before, like debt reduction to me is like, you got to have 3 to 6 months. And the reason why I say that is because like, if you're paying off debt, but you don't got your savings account, right? Like if you paid off your debt, but then your car, something happens to your car again, we're going to have to go use our credit card again. Right. So making sure we have a foundation of cash, then expounding upon like, okay, now let's knock out some of his debt. So let's use the scenario of like $250 or, let's say you had $3,000 at the end of the year, but you have your 3 to 6 months of savings set up. You may have the ability, right, to take $1,500, invest it, take $1,500, knock off some of your debt. And that, like that's a start, and then you just get it, since it's automated, you're going to wake up, you know what I mean, next year and you're going to have the same thing,
Yeah.
So, and then let's say you get a raise, all right, you get a raise. Now let's capture a little bit more. So now let's take that $250 to $500. So now we got $6,000 at the end of every year, right? If you get a raise again, let's just keep inching that up, along with your retirement plan savings, your Roth IRA, you're doing all those right things. You'll begin to start feeling really good about yourself, and it creates this body of work.
Yeah, you're deploying your own capital, really, as kind of, and there's a strategy.
Yeah, there's a strategy, and it gives you options. Yeah. That's the biggest thing. I always feel like the reason why people sometimes feel like, so strapped is because you don't have the option, right? It's like, man, once I get this check, the check's gone, right? But really what money's going to give us is the ability to give us options, right? As we're saving, doing different things, a lot of people start ending up flirting with real estate, you know what I mean? So it's like, oh, man, I may want to do like a rental property or something, but you don't have the cash to do it. It keeps us from having that issue. So it's like, okay, I do have the cash to do it. Do I really want to do it? You know what I mean?
Exactly. You get to answer that question with the most knowledge instead of a gamble or a risk, which are sometimes okay to take, but with real estate, or with going to the slots, and not to shame anyone that uses their money for that choice. These are all just, if you also have the same stance of like, oh, I want to be saving, but then you're out spending. Yeah. Are you really saving? Like those types of things.
Yeah, I think it's just like a natural progression. So it's like, okay, we got our fixed income, we got not our fixed income, we got our fixed expenses, we have our savings account. After our savings account, right, we may put some up for retirement, do a little bit of debt reduction, right? Then it will continue to evolve. Now we paid off our debt. Now we could maybe put in more into retirement. Maybe we create this little individual brokerage account to invest on my own, right? Or maybe I know I do have plans to do real estate. So now I'm building up my cash reserve to be able to do that. But meanwhile, you still got all your cookie cutter stuff kind of going. You're still saving. You're still doing that. It just gives you the option, right? And I think that's where people want to. That's ultimately what people want. I think want to feel when it comes to freedom, right? Like they don't want to feel like I gotta be at this job. Like everybody they want to enjoy their job, but they don't want to necessarily be in a position to be 100% reliant on it. So, and I think those are tools. You may still have to rely upon your job. Like you're still going to have W-2 income, but it can start advancing the ball for you.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that these pieces of advice are really foundational, fundamental, all of those words, but they're also the hardest ones to take sometimes.
That's why you automate it.
Yeah. You don't want to listen to yourself. You don't want that. The discipline sometimes is really challenging to muster up when, it's never looked like this for your family, or it's never been something that you've seen other people do. It's not, you're not surrounded by a community of people that are deploying their capital in a way that works for them, in a way that builds the assets faster. So it's like, why would I be doing that?
Yeah, no, that is 100%.
And it's hard to kind of, I think that really what I mean by bringing that up is that, for at least for me, that's kind of a scenario I've been kind of grappling with over the past couple of years, is that I've gotten a lot of financial advice from my parents. Of course, my parents are very supportive of me, but I'm starting out in a different financial situation than they were starting out in. And that's obviously the fruits of their labor. They wanted that to happen, but that means I have to listen to them differently.
Yes.
And that's hard.
Yeah, no, because people give you advice from where they are, and you kind of have to take that in perspective, because that actually happens a lot. Like, you'll have a client will come in and say, "Oh, I heard I need to do this with my taxes, with my CPA, or I need to set up." I had one person say like, "Yeah, I shouldn't do a LLC. I should do like a C corporation." And I was like, "What? Like, no, you should not." You know what I mean? But like he got advice from somebody, like it was a great
That
like
set up a successful C company or
yeah, like
something. Yeah.
that was the right tool for them, but I'm like, for you and what you're doing, like, no, like that is not.
Yeah.
So understanding people's vantage points, and also like you said, the accessibility, the education, the community that you're in. Sometimes I feel like there's even a little bit of like shame, you know what I mean? Like you don't want to undress, in front of somebody, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like you're
Especially your pocketbook.
yeah, I mean, that's just like, to me, I'm like, it's the equivalent of getting naked. You know what I mean? Like when somebody tells you, about their financial picture, like
Yeah.
it's that same level of kind of like intimacy, you know
And
what I mean?
vulnerability. For
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, man.
Yeah, I think this is a great lead into the last question that I want to ask you, and definitely something we've already talked about a little bit. But we've talked about accessibility, and we've talked about a lot, at least in my eyes, how future focused you kind of have to be with some financial planning. But how do you think folks should take their financial futures into their own hands, and where's a good place to get started?
I think so. I think where people can start, I think first you have to have a conversation with yourself, right? And understand the type of person you are. Are you somebody that's going to need help? Or are you somebody who can do it on your own? Because there are people that can do it on your own. There's just not a lot of them, you know what I mean? But the majority of people are going to need help. But if you're somebody that can do it on your own, or if you're somebody that needs help understanding, like, all right, what's the appropriate paths to take? Like, so for me, I think it's just about like breaking down, like if you do want to work with an advisor, what are the ways that you can work with an advisor? So a lot of times, like if people have retirement plans through their work, like the 401k plans, there's usually an advisor associated with that you could reach out to and do some form of planning with. Okay. And really, I'll just kind of break it down to 3 scenarios. So one is, I like to call, the majority of advisors are like broker dealers, right? Which basically means like the way that they're compensated is through some form of product implementation. So whether that be like a life insurance, disability, you open up a Roth with them, you move over an investment account, like there's some type of product that's going to be associated with it. And that's not a bad thing, because a lot of times that gives earlier investors like accessibility to them. So that's one way that people can work with advisors. And that's like, I would say like 70 or 80%. Like that's the majority of advisors. The second capacity would be more like a fee-based planning advisor. So if you're somebody that may be more like I just want some direction, I don't really want to, I don't really want to hand it over to you.
Yep.
A fee-based planner may just charge you like a flat fee, right, to put together a plan, and then they can say, hey, we can help you implement it or not. Now, they're going to be a little bit more expensive than maybe like your broker dealer. They may say, hey, it may be $1,000, $1,500 to do this financial plan. But the value that's created is the direction that's given, and then they could also help you with it as well. The third option is going to be like your robo-advisors, right? Like your Charles Schwab's, your Fidelity's, Wealthfront. It's a real popular one. Like if you're somebody that like, man, I'm going to do this on my own, like robo-advisors, but you may need some direction when it comes to investing. Like that's one of the reasons why robo-advisors are there. Sometimes, like if you get like a premier service, they'll add advisors a part of it. But more than likely, it's probably like a 1-800. You'll get a different guy every time, and you'll probably get like little patchy. It won't be like a holistic financial plan. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think those are really like 3 ways that individuals can get started. So one is like, just know yourself. Like for me, like I know I play football. I know I've worked out my entire life, but I still need a trainer. You know what I mean? Like I just found out over years, I'm like, dude, I'd rather just like delegate this to somebody else. Like I could probably run my own workouts. You know what I mean? I even do the same thing with, even with finance, you know what I mean? Like, it's like I'm running my business. Like, I still want to delegate it, you know what I mean, to somebody I trust.
Yeah.
Just because sometimes it's just hard to all keep it all in one spot. So it's understand who you are. If you're somebody that you're going to need some form of accountability, you're going to need some help, some touch point. You got those 2 advisors, right? You got an advisor that, and a lot of us usually maybe have like a roommate or a college bud or somebody that may be reaching out to them, but we may not be giving them the time of the day, right now because they're young, they just started. But those individuals, or just even just Googling, right? Like, because there are a lot of advisors out there that are targeting younger demographics.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good place to start. And then also you can always just kind of jump into like your robo advisor or like your fee-based planner if you're somebody who just wants something flat. So I think those are the best places. If you're really just starting from like ground level and you're like, man, I'm in my new job, right?
Yeah.
Got some income coming in. Like, what are the things I need to do? Well, I think automation is your best friend. Do not try to do that stuff manually on your own. Like, have a conversation with your bank. See if you have a savings account through them. See if it can just automatically pull it. And you're like, don't look at it. Like, just keep doing that until you hit your goal. And then after your goal, then, meanwhile, while you're doing that, you should still be, if your company has a 401k plan, like invest into your company's 401k plan, get the match. But then from there, you can start venturing out, and that's the big part is just master your savings. If you can be a master at saving, pretty much at any point in your life, you're going to put yourself in a good position.
Yeah, no, those are great pieces. Those are great pieces of advice. I think one thing that I want to add on and definitely hear your thoughts on too is something that frustrates me sometimes about financials and finances and the space, especially as it relates to your employer, is that the language is very inaccessible.
Yeah.
It is sometimes, especially as a young person, you sit in on a meeting where they're talking about your benefits, they're talking to you about what you can't do, what the all of those things look like. And I leave the meeting with nothing because no one is explaining anything. It's almost explained to me as if I should know it. And that is a little frustrating when this is my first interaction with this type of product or benefits. So like, how would you have suggested I navigate that other than being frustrated? Because I was.
Well, what I would say is for a lot of employers, like they don't understand the language either, right? There's just something that as like a company, they know that they should have, right? And then they're hiring people and like nobody goes to school to do, like people do go to school for HR, but it's like medical benefits, you know what I mean? Or 401k. So they're explaining it the way that it's being explained to them at some capacity or even at their level of understanding it, right? They're just like, oh, I know that this is something I have to let them know. So I would say one, maybe for the employer, like the people that are presenting it, a little bit of, not saying that you're not extending this, but just for those that are listening on the pod, like give them a little bit of grace because they probably don't understand what they're talking about
100%.
But
100%.
the second thing would be is really now that's on us as on the back end as the industry is to, a lot of times when people are implementing these plans or structures, sometimes I just have to think about the plan as we got to think about explaining the plan as if it's explained to the person that has like the least amount of knowledge possible, right? Like how can we make this like elementary? And if you have other questions, like we can go have a one-on-one, right? And have questions. And I think that's the biggest thing, like giving pain points, like a lot of young people, like you don't know what medical insurance, you know what I mean? Like a deductible, you know what I mean? Like what is this stuff? But I think it's just our jargon right now. That's a problem that's been going on for a long time. Because it's not just you. Like your parents probably do the same thing. They just done it 3 or 4 times with different companies. You know what I mean? For the listeners, it's like they're just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna hear it. I usually did this and go to something else. But I think that's on the industry. I think we just got to start steering our vocabulary to things that are going to make sense or at least extend the opportunity for one-on-ones or educationals, right? Having like an educational, or the advisors on those plans being able to come out and really dig deep and give you the opportunity to understand like what those things are. I think those would be big things. So that's an idea. So for employers, having their benefits people have, come out and then like re-educate.
Yeah.
Almost like a fireside chat, like, hey, like what do you guys don't understand?
Yeah. Take it out of the meeting type like obviously have the informational session, but then like create space to debrief definitely would be great. I'm speaking, I think that all of what you said is so good because it's a combination of we all need to do better, which is so true. We do need to give grace to, and space to the people that are providing the information in whatever way they are. We need to encourage the industry to increase its accessibility to people that have historically been excluded, and the individuals also need to take some personal accountability on on understanding what their situations are, especially in these financially dependent situations, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's the story of like the human experience, right?
Yeah.
Like we all need each other. You know what I mean? In order for us to get this ship going the right way, you know, like, you know, we're going to have to, it's not just me, right? Like I need whoever I'm working with to be able to, you know, sit down and be able to educate it. And then that person's going to take it and educate 2 or 3 more people. So that's the human experience. And that's what I think, you know, that's what I love about problem solving. Is the fact that you are going to have to inevitably, if it's a big problem like we need to solve, it's going to take everybody, right? Just like what you're doing, you know, like with the podcast, like it takes multiple people. It takes everything, man.
It does. It takes a village. But yeah, we got to be in it for each other. We got to grow with us, not grow with me.
I love that.
Derrick, so thank you so much for being on this episode. It's been amazing.
Thank you. It's been awesome. Thank you for having me.
Derrick, it's been amazing having you on. Where, if anything, can people stay in touch with you, or what do you got coming up that people can get involved with?
Yeah, well, you can always follow me on LinkedIn. My name is spelled Derrick and Alexander.
Thank you so much, Derrick. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate your time. For our listeners of Grow With Us, I'd like to plug a few resources that might be helpful for you. If you'd like to stay in touch with all of our featured jobs and opportunities at InTulsa, then please join our talent network. You can join at talent.intulsa.com. That's talent.intulsa.com. By joining our talent network, you will get access to our newsletter where you can stay up to date with our latest career advice, featured opportunities with InTulsa partner companies, and our placement success stories. Be sure to subscribe on Apple Podcasts and Spotify to be notified when more episodes of Grow With Us are released. Let us know what you think about how we're doing by rating and reviewing. Huge thank you to our editors at Rant9 Production and Jesse Ulrich. This has been Grow With Us.